And welcome back to Mornin with Bill and Joe. And for the first time, a guest. It is John DeVore. DeVore.
Oh, I didn't know we had an echo
Oh, wait.
option.
And I have my sound effect.
There's got to be some sign.
Thank you.
That's got to be some sort of test of whether or not you're a sociopath. The way her face just lights up with the fake applause. By the way, look what I brought you.
I love the applause. I like to do the point thing. I wanted to, where you point at the audience. Yeah, I love. Right, that's a good one too.
Yes, you do reference types of bows in your book, which is why we're so happy to have you on today. Not only so we can catch up, but we can talk about your new book, which is being released when?
June 18th, just a few weeks from now.
June 18th, Theater Kids, A True Tale of Off Broadway. Now, Bill, I read the whole thing because I'm a good student. Have you read all of it?
I'm almost done. I'm on page 120. I apologize. I'm a very slow reader, but I absolutely love it. And I'm in the era, I think Maxim is about to end, which I wasn't even sure, considering the subject matter, if you were going to mention Maxim, but I guess it's oddly theater adjacent.
Well, what I like to say, and DeVore, please correct me if I'm wrong, this book is part memoir, part theater history textbook, and part self-help book.
Oh, really? Self-help? In what way is it a self-help book?
There's lots of things I wouldn't do.
Original title. Things Joe wouldn't do.
That's a wonderful marketing angle. Yes. Do the opposite of everything that I do in the book. That's a correct summation. It's a book about failing and making bad art and kind of flopping around. I also tried to capture like the early aughts and sort of like that Gen X period too. I mentioned, to Bill, I mentioned Maxim because in the year I'm really writing about 2004, that's when I returned to that bizarre magazine. And it's bizarre to even think that magazine ever existed. Did
you two work there at the same time?
We overlapped, certainly. Yeah. I was in Stuff at the same time he was in Maxim, which was the same company. Under Dennis Publishing, which I think still exists as far as the week is concerned, but that's about it.
Yeah, if it exists, it exists in Old Blighty in England.
Yes.
And for years, I had heard the legend of Bill Schultz. That Bill was a rascal at Stuff, which was sort of the kind of smarter, funnier Maxim. It wasn't as successful as it wasn't as successful as Maxim, but it was. I think
the numbers used to be. This is back when people read magazines, the numbers used to be absolutely insane. It was like 12 million, 15 million, or something a year. It was absolutely bonkers.
It was the last
reach.
It was the last gasp, certainly.
Yes,
and I think I wrote a line in the book. I returned to the magazine after a couple of years of doing internet stuff and failing. And I returned to Maxim magazine in 2004 thinking this is stable.
I mean, continue. I'm sure there wasn't supposed to be any laughter inserted there.
I have a laugh track, but that kind of feels wrong.
Well, no, but that's why this book is great for people like myself who's not as well versed in theater things as Joe is. It's absolutely not that I was surprised, but there is many laugh out loud moments. I refuse to say lol. And
LOL.
People say lol.
No, they don't.
Cool kids do.
Okay.
But it's so much drinking and drugging, and the bad things that happen as a result of it. That always makes for good read. And really, you're right. Just it is an amazing time capsule. So many weird memories were flooding back into my head. It really was, I hate the phrase, a different time, but between the fact that magazines were a thing, it was still kind of post, even like 2005, 2006, it still felt very post 9/11. I absolutely, Maxim, as it was then, would not be able to, you couldn't get away with even having that back then. I love just the little things, some of the commentary that someone might make who again would be more audience than in your case on stage. Just your thoughts on Rent and stuff like that. Like I went to Emerson, and everyone there thought that they were a cast member at Rent.
Did you go to Emerson?
Yeah.
Oh, so you know theater kids.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I know them. That's the entire school. And I would just keep my mouth shut on my thoughts on Rent. And you so better verbalized all of my thoughts on that goddamn play than I ever did. And it's little things like that that makes it fun for the whole family.
Yeah.
Don't patronize me.
Okay. So John, we go way back. We were just saying, when was the last time we saw each other? Yeah. This was probably years ago. And we were both leading, slightly different lives then. And I was a theater kid. I pretty much made that known even when they hired me at Fox. One of my first conversations when I got hired with Roger Ailes was about theater, specifically off-Broadway. He started his career as an off-Broadway producer. So is
that right?
Yeah, in my interview with him, we just kind of talked about theater, which was interesting. So I never was hiding that fact about myself. However, I was like, I tricked them into hiring me. Let me not give them any more reasons to question why they did. Yeah. So I wouldn't, quote musical theater or, break into song.
Boy, you broke that habit.
But yeah, I don't know that you and I ever spoke about theater together.
I mean, I always knew that you had a foot in theater. And I want to say that near the end of our internment at Fox, you were doing a show, weren't you?
I was doing an off-Broadway show at the time. Wait, because Andy Levy came and saw it. Did you see it with him?
I don't think that I did, but what was the show though? Because we did talk about it, and I had already made my mind up that you were good people.
Sure.
And then I found out retroactively it's because you're a very specific subspecies of theater kid.
Yeah.
But what was the show though? It was
called That Bachelorette Show.
Okay, right.
It was a Ken Davenport production. He's produced some Broadway stuff as well. But he was a big fan of these interactive improv-based shows. I did the Awesome 80s Prom with him as well, where the audience votes for King and Queen. This one, they voted for who I would marry at the end of the show.
That's awesome. There's certainly pages devoted to showmances, a term that Joe taught me, and that show is indeed how she met and finally married her way better half.
I was always against.
Was that a showman's?
Yes.
Is he a theater kid too? Then
he went to
that's beautiful.
Boston Conservatory for Musical Theater. And so we met doing a show. I was always against showmances, but this one has so far lasted 9 years. So
I love it. Okay.
Yeah. But as a theater person, there's so many references, especially in the beginning of your book, to what it is to be a theater kid. And generationally, I'm a little bit younger.
Yeah.
But the commonalities are there, and I'm sure are still there for Gen Z. God, the little things, the rituals that you would have with your friends pre and post show, going to the diner. Everyone has where they go after a show. You mentioned eating baklava. We would eat mozzarella sticks. You even said at the cast parties afterwards. This was so great. Best friends spooning in hammocks. I have done that with my friends after a show in their backyard in a hammock. It's like
there's platonic spooning and then there's dry humping, and both those things are represented in the theater kid ritual. Yeah.
You're all shoulder blades. That must be so uncomfortable for the other person. Well, all right angles.
When I was wearing my back brace, it really wasn't comfortable.
I had to get a scoliosis reference in there at some point, Jen. I apologize.
But there's also, you mentioned a bunch of things that I think really, I still to this day believe. Like, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late.
I like that.
That was definitely, something that was hammered into us from an early age. The things you got away with performing. in like high school and college that you can't anymore. I was in a production of The Boys Next Door, which is a play about mentally handicapped adults.
Oh, yes.
And there I am at age 16 playing a mentally handicapped woman trying to help my boyfriend find his keys. It was
Can we get
wild.
a taste of that, Joe?
No.
Can we see the character, please?
I was also in a production of Aida, which I now know is your mother's name.
Yes.
I was in a production of Aida. I had to braid my own wig. That I won't even go into more detail because I don't have to. I couldn't do it today. Just couldn't be done.
That's so good. It's so inappropriate. I love it so much.
Yes, but oh gosh, just reading this book had like flooding back all of these memories and like really happy ones, but also some really weird ones.
I'm confused. Why was braiding the wig inappropriate? I have not seen Aida.
Oh.
She's an Ethiopian princess.
Yes.
Oh! Oh my God! Was that even allowed back then? I mean, I'm amazed.
There was an Elton John musical.
Yes.
About Aida.
Yes.
My mom was named for the opera, for Verdi's opera. And then
we need to make that distinction. Like, whoa.
Well, I mean, in case somebody is like watching right now, being like, "Is he talking about Verdi or is he talking about Elton John's like late '90s follow up to?"
Which is my guilty pleasure musical. I'm
Aida?
obsessed with it. Yes.
Is that right? Look,
I'm judging you now.
You know, theater kids, I think, is partly about the very niche, avant-garde experimental theater that I fell into. That didn't want to be popular, that wanted to create really arty, very pretentious sort of work. And the whole while, I was a closet, end of sentence. I was a closet musical theater kid, though. Like there's many kinds of theater kid. I've learned after writing this book. There is a such thing as a Fox News theater kid, because I have thought about why I was on Red Eye for so many years for no money, but why I sold my soul for no money. And one answer I have is I loved the makeup.
So true.
I contributed negatively to society by playing a liberal puppet on Fox News because I loved the little paper. I loved the hair. I loved all of it. A theater kid. The Ailes as off-Broadway producer thing is wild, and it makes 100%
absolutely
sense.
The presentation on that channel alone lends itself.
That there's an alternate reality where Roger Ailes is a happy little queen producer. That there's an alternate reality where maybe he had a hit early on in his career.
Well, I know he was producer for the Mike Douglas show for a while, which I don't know. I guess that's not exactly Broadway, but it's a little less what he ended up doing overall.
There's all kinds of theater kids, and I do love musical theater. I just saw Tommy last night.
What did you think?
It was all right.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Not a great. I've not seen a lot of great musicals this season, but I do love it. I'm just trying to think of what my guilty pleasure.
I was about to ask. I would love to hear one that you're obsessed with.
The Aida one just really blows my mind.
The power ballads in that are stunning.
As was your appropriation.
Yes.
Yes. Unbelievable, the moxie on this one.
I am a ride or die for Phantom of the Opera. That's.
I remember you mentioning that. I love that you sort of described it as Batman for Batman for theater.
That's how I rationalized it as a teenage boy. I was like, well, he lives in a cave and he's got a cape. and every night he appears in the mirror of a little girl.
Even the score is very Elfman-y. I forgot the mirror part in Batman, but the cave part is.
That's what the Phantom does. That's the story. He stalks a teenage girl.
No, I forgot how Batman did that. I forgot the mirror.
No, what?
Batman being out a kid.
Well, he had Robin.
Maybe you could say it's Little Shop of Horrors. You mentioned seeing that with your mother, watching the film, and then bringing her to the Broadway show.
Stalking Rick Moranis.
I love that. I love that musical, and it is so outrageous, and it's like. So my fiance has I am being sucked into a large family where there are these 8-year-olds. I have suddenly have these 8-year-old nieces and nephews, and the conversation was, should I show them or should they see Little Shop of Horrors? And it's and it's gross, and it's got a monster, and one of the big jokes is domestic abuse. Right? So we showed it to these kids, and they just loved it because it's incredible. It's such a great anti-musical theater that was born sort of in that downtown off Broadway world that I'm writing about. So one of downtown theater, which is edgier and less sort of like than Broadway, one of downtown theater's biggest gifts to Broadway was Little Shop.
Yeah.
The music.
Great musical.
I think you can still find the original ending online. They cleaned it up for the kids.
Yes,
it's not as gloomy.
Which John gets into in the book.
The music's just amazing as well. So I know you were very lukewarm on Tommy, so I can cross that off my list. The good and the bad and the ugly of what you've seen recently. I haven't seen. I mean, you
don't see theater, although I learned recently via shitty Twitter that you are a 1776 fan.
Oh, it's a Schultz family favorite. The original Hamilton, the much wider Hamilton. I remember.
That's right. Yeah.
I went down. I don't know why I like deleted scenes. I like seeing stuff I'm not supposed to see, I suppose. But usually there's a reason why they're deleted. But I was definitely going down a 1776 wormhole on YouTube. There's lots of deleted scenes, don't you know? But I love it. It's perfectly cast. Although Max was really fat in real life, but
I don't think that do you see things, Joe? Are you?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty blessed. One of my very good friends is a Broadway casting director, and so she gets to see everything for free, and she will often take me as her date. So I recently saw The Notebook.
I forgot about that.
Movie is better. I saw the new musical Lempicka.
I wanted to see Lempicka. It has like a fan base. I've heard very mixed things about it.
I love seeing new work. I love seeing stuff that is not a revival and not a jukebox musical. Right. However, it has to be brilliant in order for it to stay, in order for it to sell tickets. Because otherwise, I hate to say it, but like most of America who's coming to New York wants to see something they're familiar with, which is unfortunate, but that ends up being a movie that's been made into a musical, or it's a jukebox one. It's music they know.
Or it's star power. And there are some instances where star power, I think, can... I'm curious. So no, I didn't see Lempicka. Did you see Cabaret yet?
No, but I would love to.
Oof.
Yeah, they're doing bills. Like you can sit at tables, sort of like.
Isn't that how they did it with the Scottish guy as well?
I think so.
Yeah.
But I love anytime they even like transformed the lobby and like where the bar is to really any sort of theater, because that's sort of getting into the off Broadway vibe.
Yeah, this new Cabaret has a environmental pre-show where you can walk around.
There is a great learning aspect in your book with regards to specifically exactly what, because I guess I never really knew. In my stupid literal head, I thought off-Broadway, and more so I guess off-Broadway, just meant it wasn't on Broadway. But I didn't realize that there was a number of seats that went into the equation. There's a big and almost very specific definition.
And then there's an aesthetic definition too, and off Broadway is often confused or intermixes with the avant-garde, which is a very European sort of idea. One thing I like about, I love the theater. There's the more commercial end on Broadway, but then there's this whole other world of, weird little artists. I'm trying to think of famous members of the avant-garde. Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe was part of the Worcester Group, which is probably one of the preeminent American avant-garde theaters. And so he started his career out in downtown theater in the late 70s and the early 80s, doing weird, non-commercial, rolling around naked. He was Spalding Gray was part of that company
Sure,
too.
Emersonian.
Harvey Fierstein was part of the off Broadway world. Sam Shepard was part of off Broadway, and I just loved that scene. I find it very romantic. People who are making art and are in the case of this book, are determined to make sure it is not popular. They're determined to make sure it is, that friend of mine, that's, the play that I write about, this 4-hour adaptation of a William Faulkner book, that he designs in such a way that only 13 people a night can see it. I love that, especially coming from magazines and TV and this world of everything's got to be popular. I find it very romantic, artists who don't give a shit, or maybe they do give a shit, but they want to be successful on their terms. It's like Gen Xers, I think, and maybe Bill, you can back me up. It used to be we were against selling out. And then the sea change. And I don't disagree with the sea change. I think creative laborers, I think people who work in entertainment and media deserve a fair paycheck. They deserve to be paid what they're worth. But there was a time when selling out was not, you didn't want to be corporate. You didn't want to compromise your work to be popular. And that kind of changed. That was a sort of a millennial change that happened in the, slowly through the aughts. But I do love that aspect of theater. Those people who are never going to be popular, but are making their art right now. And there's plenty of people still doing it.
Mm-hmm. Douglas just saw, I didn't see it. We have a friend who was in an off-Broadway show. The production company is Torn Pages. And the theater is in Rip Torn's old house.
Sure. Yes, I'm his son.
Yes.
Oh, what's his son's name? He does what's his name? Because he does a lot of off Broadway self-production stuff.
Actually, at this point, his son's probably pretty old.
Yeah, probably.
Rip lived a long life in spite of himself.
Douglas said when he went, he entered a house, like a brownstone, and he was like, there were shoes by the door. It was like someone's house. And we go up the stairs, and this play took place in a living room. It was a 2-person play about a divorce. And it's just them in the living room. It only seated, I think, about 40 people. So it was like very intimate. He said it was like a really cool experience.
That kind of loft theater became popular during peak lockdowns. Last year there was a very well-received production of Uncle Vanya performed in a loft. I've seen a couple of loft shows in the past few years. And this has been done in New York since the 50s. There was an experimental theater called Living Theater, and they used to have happenings, and they used to produce weird plays in apartments. One thing I love about New York is that, there's like a line in the book that, every square inch of this city has been used by some ambitious weirdo, has been used as a theater. As a stage, every street corner, every shitty storefront, every inch of the city, somebody has been like, we can do a show here, we can do a show there. Since I know Bill is an aspiring New York historian, but like the entirety of Manhattan at one point or another probably housed a vaudeville theater. This is a busy city. And busy places need entertainment.
One of the if you can call this theater, one of the oldest residential areas in South Street Seaport, 1773, maybe 79, was also the staging area for the dog rat fights. And it was as simple as betting on a bag full of rats and 2 dogs, and whichever dog killed the most rats at the end, those people would win. And it was this famous place, and they also had bare knuckle boxing matches there.
Yeah.
And I
Off
do know that
Broadway.
they had all kinds of sort of vaudeville type stuff as well.
Mm.
And it's just this dingy basement that isn't much bigger than
Yeah,
your
but you know,
apartment.
those were non-union animals, so I
I think they were SAG. But oh no, bag. The rats were in a bag. No SAG.
Nice.
Thank you. But no, to that point, and it's like also to the history, you're very good at like seamlessly going from amazing, often drunken anecdotes to some sort of aspect or part of theater's past that I certainly didn't know about. Even when you talk about like they just assume, probably rightfully so, that the first theater was just a bunch of Neanderthals acting around a fire about the day's hunt, and stuff like that. And when the way that you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that was like their once they sort of learned how to pretend and perform. There you go. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No. The hope I have is that this book will bring more people who are theater kids, inspire them to come out and to be more open about their theater kidness, and to talk about theater. I in the epilogues, which I don't, no spoilers, Bill. I kind of begin to play with this idea that that theater is becoming sort of the antidote to social media and the internet for me. That I'm really, in the past few years, really rekindled a relationship with theater. I like going out and sitting in a live space and seeing weird things I love a shitty Broadway show sometimes. And just going to the theater is an activity that just feels subversive these days, because I'm also online all the time and tweeting and raging, and it's such an unhealthy. The internet is so
It really is
so unhealthy.
But John, I
They're gonna get a rehab
do
for it.
wonder, have you noticed, because I have, theater etiquette is getting worse and worse. Maybe I'm just sitting in unlucky seats surrounded by loud, disrespectful people, but the pulling out of the phones, the full-on conversations with people sitting next to them, it's getting really obstructive, or what's the word? Disruptive.
Joanne is the word, I believe.
Yes, I am an old woman, and I'm
we
angry.
have a graphic called Joanne Mom.
I spent zero money on this free ticket, and I want to get my money.
How dare you? I do feel there is a trend happening where society is kind of bifurcating into a barbarian tribe. And when I go to Broadway, and it's a lot of people who are, maybe this is the only show they'll see or have ever seen. Movie theaters. When I go to a movie theater like Alamo Drafthouse here in New York,
love it,
which is for film fans, and there's no commercials, and they really they take pride in enforcing rules of behavior. I have a great experience. When I go to, say, like a Regal or an AMC or something, less so. And I really suffer no fools. There are very few times I'm more like Batman than in a movie theater behind somebody scrolling, because I will just be like, the fuck you doing? Like, it's the only time I'm like, like I'm up. I turn into a cop. It's awful. So there are theaters, I went and saw the Steve Carell Uncle Vanya at Lincoln
How was
Center.
it?
It was okay. Steve Carell, my fear is that he's not getting the response he wants, and he'll never do Broadway again, because he's really funny on stage. It's not a great production. I personally thought, but he's a delight. And so is Allison Pill. Anyway, that audience, though, that's not a TKTS sort of tourist audience, and they were fine. They were great. But I think you'll find that a lot of people right now in a lot of social spaces. I have a friend in Virginia who is very active in his church. Go figure. And he would probably have a similar observation, that there are people who don't know how to behave in church. So, I mean, this is a broader conversation, how I think the lockdowns just broke us.
Sure. Definitely broke Bill.
I was already broken.
Yeah, no, he's pretty broken.
And it just shattered the pieces even more so. Well, I guess you both could probably speak to this about just what would you say are the differences or similarities between, say, a young theater kid in 2024 versus a young theater kid in 2004? It's not like that this was always a crowd that was relatively, even though we didn't use the word back then, woke, I suppose. So it's hard for me to imagine that they got more woke, but perhaps they did. She was still playing in blackface, so there's that.
No, that was
blackface.
That was
cut that. That's all the blackface.
I wore a wig, but I did not paint my face.
Cancel.
One of the things that saved me during the peak lockdowns was discovering theater kids on TikTok. And I learned that I had a never-ending appetite for 15-year-olds singing Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd.
Sure.
Oh, so I think being a theater kid right now is probably a little bit more. It's a divisive pair of words, right? Theater kid is an insult, but also, for some people and for others, it's a compliment. I think there's a lot more community around theater kids. I think there's a younger generation that really unabashedly, they don't have the self-hatred that's in the book. They don't, and their subculture is kind of, like that Wicked is a huge movie. It's going to be a huge movie.
Yeah.
Broadway for a lot of people is big business, I think we're already forgetting how insanely popular and omnipresent Hamilton was. I mean, it was like for a brief period, it was the coolest thing in pop culture. Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy?
I mean, I hate the cliche. We'll never see something like that again, but I just don't see how we will.
It was more of a return. Broadway musical theater is America's original pop music.
Sure, yeah. I suppose that must have been a little what it was like when West Side Story first came out. That one seemed to me to be one that really captured.
I mean, but before, like rock really became rock, pop music was crooners and show tunes. I mean, musicals were pop music, so I think Hamilton was a glimpse at how things were once upon a time.
Well, see, and I'm sort of hoping that musical theater will actually transition a bit into what I saw recently. I saw Stereophonic on Broadway.
Oh, did you? I've not seen it. How good is it?
So it is not a musical. It is a play with music. Sure. And Will Arbor, is that his name? From Arcade Fire.
Butler, yeah.
Butler, from Arcade Fire, did the music. The music is stunning. I want the album. Like, I'm obsessed. It's the lead actress who my friend cast this show, so I have like a little intel. She was not a singer. And I hate that. I always hate that when someone gets a role and it's like, I sing beautifully, but I'm not a singer. Yeah. Oh, how'd that happen?
Brilliant. Yeah. Right? That's how I felt my first time I was on Red Eye.
You did start singing. It was strange, but delightful. But she has sort of like a Florence and the Machine kind of quality. It's all about the relationships. The set is incredible. It's maybe a little long. However, the music is necessary. The songs drive the story, and it's story based. So much of musical theater now, I feel like, isn't. It's not, the acting isn't good, but the music is, or vice versa. And I just want it all to be cohesive.
Even in the musical theater world, there are musical theater fans and Stephen Sondheim fans. And Sondheim representing the more cerebral, sort of like, he's the one person over the past 40 years who really pushed the form in ways that other people hadn't. I obviously am a Sondheim-esque. I love everything he's ever written. I love his musicals.
I
Merrily,
love the part in the book.
Merrily We Roll Along is the best musical currently, I think, on Broadway, even though it's closing in a couple of weeks. I get what you're saying about Stereophonic, and I've not seen it yet. I have plans to see it. I suspect that we're getting a little bit into marketing language about what is and what isn't a musical. Sondheim was concerned with what is and what isn't a musical as well. And so Stereophonic is allowing some people who might turn their nose up at musicals to go enjoy a musical.
Sure.
I've heard nothing but tremendous things about it. I saw Mary Jane instead of Stereophonic, but I'm
okay.
Go
so I really want to see that. I saw Mary Jane off Broadway at near the workshop with Carrie Coon.
Yeah. Oh,
and now I can't. I'm working on a scene for Mary Jane in my acting class currently.
Oh, you are such a theater kid.
I sure am.
She was very excited about it.
But guess what hasn't changed? The role I'm playing is Chaya, the Hasidic Jewish woman.
Boy, you got a lot of these in your back pocket.
Yeah, well, I feel like in acting class it's okay. But when I reread this play, I can only hear Carrie Coon in this role of Mary Jane. So
my fiance saw the Carrie Coon one too, and she had a similar fear. Doubled along with this is a movie star debut, right?
Sure.
She's great.
Rachel McAdams, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rachel McAdams is real good.
That's good.
And she plays her sort of bouncy Hollywood girlishness. She plays with that.
Okay.
And is aware of it, but she has the steel and the kind of she has the steel that the role requires. It was great. I mean, Amy Herzog, that playwright, also has another play on Broadway called Enemy of the People with
Jeremy Strong
and Christopher from Sopranos.
Imperial, Michael Imperioli?
Yes, right. And that is also very good.
Yeah. That space is cool too. So yeah, I have to
circle the circle.
They explore it, the space.
They sure do.
See, I know my terms.
Well, which is that in the circle and the square space? So speaking of, you performed in a box in a brick garage.
Did. That was a wonderful segue, Joe.
Yeah. Thank you.
Don't give her that.
Yay!
Oh, good. At least you didn't use the applause button.
Which I really wish that your book had pictures, because I want to see all of this as you're describing it.
You got to do that at either the book party or at a reading anywhere. I think a slideshow would go a long way. Just the styles alone. I mean, you do a good job talking about the way you would dress in certain phases of your life and stuff like that. I need those visuals. Oh.
I do have some photos that I might share on social. I didn't really want them in the book because it's a memoir, more memoir than nonfiction. But in the book, during a very low point in my life, a friend kind of throws me a lifeline and casts me in a production of As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. This very long, very convoluted, very pretentious novel about a southern hayseed family journey to bury their mom. And the director's concept was to, inside the theater he created, to build a sort of coffin that could fit 13 people. And so the show, 13 people sat in the box, and then 14 of us performed through trapdoors and through holes in the ceiling. We performed in the box, terrifying the audience. And some nights there weren't 13 people. Some nights, and the show was like 4 hours long with one intermission. He could not have designed a show to be seen by fewer people if he had tried. And he spent tens of thousands of dollars on this production. And he had a vision, and he was an artist. And, I was trying to pretend I was sober the whole time.
Well, it was also when you were in the knee deep in the middle of the Dennis Publishing days. And if memory, you wouldn't know it to look at them, but there were a lot of hours with those magazines, particularly come closing time and stuff like that. I do not know how you juggle both, especially considering all the amount of lines you had to learn. That's the thing that I always thought was fascinating about
he
acting.
didn't really learn them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I know.
No, I make that point too. That for all, I went to acting school. It for me ultimately, it's like learning the lines is everything. Scene work is all of it. I think is pointless unless you learn those lines. That's the real work of being an actor, and it sucks. I hate that work.
Yeah,
I don't have the brain for it. No, I mean, but look, in the book, Maxim at the time was very popular. It was incredibly popular, and so I decided to become a popular men's magazine editor than to dwell in off Broadway. And maybe I'd be a better person if I had, but I wouldn't have met you here.
You could expense.
If I hadn't done shitty macho jerk off magazines, I would never have met certain people.
Yeah,
and you're a luckier man for it.
And I'm a luckier man. If I had not had done that, I would never have gotten laid off from Maxim and then hired at Sirius to do a Maxim radio show. Yeah, that sucks.
Fate.
And then I would drink, and then I would go across the street to Fox News.
Yeah, we were absolute neighbors at the time.
That was like 1 block away.
Yeah,
and I would say things like, "Obama, I like him."
Did
and then I'd wake up to death threats on Twitter. I would literally be like, I don't know, I voted for Obama. I think he's okay. And then people are like, you should fucking die, DeVore. I'm like,
I've stolen your line. And I think that that's one of the many reasons that you were popular on the show and asked back well after my time there, was the fact that I've always stolen your line. You're a liberal who hates liberals. And you certainly do get your little digs in when you can in the book sometimes as well. You're good about making fun of the man in the mirror, liberal-wise, and you did a better job of it than me, actually. But I hate liberals. Appealed to a lot of people.
Now I hate liberals. I hate them all.
That's yes. Well, now I know what it was like freshman year wandering around Beacon Street on acid. What was it like wandering around Richmond and on acid? I don't think I've ever even been on a different plane, so to speak, in the Deep South before. In fact, I rarely go to the Deep South unless you count Florida.
It boggles my mind how plentiful, available, and destigmatized marijuana is.
Yes,
or not, weed, cannabis. It's really remarkable to me how normalized some psychedelics are. But I just don't think the Gen Zers and millennials ate quite as much LSD as and which, like I'll talk to people who are a few years younger. They're like, oh man, we did a bunch of mushrooms and like had this wonderful experience. And I'm like, I ate acid once and licked concrete for for 6 hours. Richmond
it's so true.
Richmond is a city that where if you lived there for the past 25 years, you saw immense changes. Richmond was most recently in the news because a few years ago, they took down Confederate statues that were hanging out. In the 90s, Richmond was, it was the town Philip Morris built. Cigarettes were cheap. It was a city. It was a city at the time with a very vast, poor black population and a vast, poor white population, and I was mugged twice there. It was a violent city in the 90s, and it was a city. Richmond was once the capital of an entirely different nation. It was Richmond was designed to be this grand sort of place. Richmond is a defeated capital. And when I was there in the 90s, it very much still felt like that. Like Richmond was supposed to be the seat, the Washington, D.C. of its own country, of the Confederacy. And if you visit it now, some of the Lafayette, some of the boulevards, some of downtown. It looks like DC. It's very wide and grandiose, but it's Richmond.
Mm.
Just everything from your description of like, I love when you're talking about thinking about some of the Confederate generals, their statues coming to life and sort of taking account of everything that's changed right now as far as Richmond is concerned. But there's so much in the book that I particularly loved, of a time that is so never going to be here again. From the amount of time it took until you finally got your cell phone, I believe the reason was that you didn't want to be in a hijacked plane and not have one. To the fact that I believe your mom gave you a roll of quarters or extra roll of quarters as you were coming to New York. The fact that you stayed at a YMCA, all of these like stuff that are so 90s, early 2000s that are just seem like a different country now. It's. Yeah, the past is a different planet, I guess. But like, so much of that.
But that is. But that is being a New Yorker. It's like it's if you stay here for 10 years, you're going to say hello and goodbye to things. And the longer you do, you say goodbye to things. One charm about Astoria, which is where a neighborhood near and dear to our hearts, is. I have a theory that, Astoria has a very strong immigrant middle class of Greeks and Turks and Bangladeshis. And because it's such a strong middle class, it resists gentrification in a way. It doesn't keep it at bay, but Astoria has gentrified a little slower than, say, like Williamsburg. And so I still like to visit Astoria because there's still... I love the businesses, it's still a very dorky neighborhood. And I love it. I love Astoria because every so often you'll see a business that was created by some Greeks in the back room who were like, what are these 20-somethings from Manhattan like? Mm-hmm. Right. And then the next day they'll start a business called like, Cafe Paninis. Or like a acai bowl paradise. These shitty businesses where they're just like, how do we attract the businesses of millennials?
And now though, it's all of the pot shops, the marijuana shops are popping up. But I passed one the other day that was a Greek-owned. I'm assuming a Greek-owned pot shop because it was something amazing. Like Dionysus hash, or like it was some Greek god name and hash. And I was like, this is what I love about this neighborhood.
I love it. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. They're like, we got a bunch of Greeks sitting in a back room. We got to get in on this.
Yeah.
I love that you can buy marijuana-laced baklava there probably, and quite literally, and it's exactly how it sounds, about 2 blocks away here, there's a place that serves sheep's heads. And it is exactly what it is. It's a plate with a severed, decapitated sheep's head on it. The eyes, the brains, the whole deal.
It might be,
and they eat this.
It might be halal, though. There's
that's it.
There's a lot of halal around.
I only know it because I think you guys
also because a story. I mentioned this in the book. Part of it, the Little Egypt on Steinway. I mean, it's not so little anymore, but there was a part of Astoria that's been Muslim for decades. Moroccans, North Africans. I love the neighborhood. It's so ethnically diverse.
Yeah.
Aggressively so. I love Steinway. It's.
I was also thinking of your book last night as I was making the trek home from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And you talk about, the hour or so it takes to get from Brooklyn back to Queens, which it did take me. But there are other things, as we're saying how much the city has changed, there's a lot that is still the same upon reading your experience in the early aughts. And something you mentioned, and I'm so happy you did, is the second floor bathroom in the Union Square Barnes and Noble. You essentially say if you're a real New Yorker, and I know I have used that bathroom so many times.
She is such a pro at public bathrooms. I'm very proud of her whenever she finds a new one.
I mean, it's one of the classics. And it's one of the ones that's lasted the longest.
Yeah.
And it's gone through, I think they just finished yet another redesign of the bathroom at the second floor.
Sure, sure.
They every so often they try to implement new policies to keep it from turning into a sewer.
Uh-huh.
And they're currently losing that battle, but every so often they're like, let's hire somebody to clean it a couple times a day.
Well, the last time I was there was like a bouncer outside.
Yes,
and
right.
It was like I could only go in when someone else came out, like just to keep, the traffic moving.
But like the last time I was there, that guy was there, or one of them was there, and yet still I walked through little puddles of pea water.
Right? Yeah.
If you can, and I love it.
Waxing nostalgic on public bathrooms.
Oh,
It
wouldn't be our show if we didn't. So
I almost feel like we should have a part 2 on this because I've still got a million questions, but we've already done an hour.
I just haven't seen you all. It's such a delight. And yeah, I'm glad that we're doing this. And sorry I avoided each and every one of your invitations for 6 years.
Oh,
we get that a lot.
Yeah.
This is not our first rejection rodeo, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Look how pleased you two have a lot in common between your theater kidness and how pleased you can get with each other. Sure. It's weird. It's like I'm with this weird John and Joe sandwich of giggling.
But I have one more question for you. You talk a lot about actual people and some relationships that maybe weren't so favorable.
That's a great question. Yes.
Specifically, an affair with a woman named Julie and friends who would check in on you that you would just ignore.
Yeah.
So
I think that was me.
Did you use real names? And if you did, what did they think of your book? Have you sent them copies?
I absolutely did. I mean, Julie gave me notes. I write about another relationship that I showmance with Mickey. Uh-huh. I ran it past them. It's very weird to be written about.
Sure.
I know that. This book is. I really struggle with writing about recovery. I haven't had a drink in 14 years as of 2 weeks ago.
Congrats.
Thank you. But the book, I was far from sobering up. And so one thing I hoped about writing in the book was sort of, look, the redemption story is kind of boring, right? And then he quit drinking and became a good person. It's not really how it happens. I did want to write. I had to write about my drinking. I hint in the book that down the road I recover. That the person who's writing the book now is somebody looking back.
Sure.
In terms of part of the drama of the book was when I was drinking and in grieving, I pushed away people who wanted to love me and wanted to be there for me. And to me, that is the saddest thing about my drinking. Wasn't the antics, but it was the love and happiness that I pushed away.
Well, you've gone through a lot of loss. Was it more difficult to write about that, or sort of when you were kind of at your worst chemicals-wise?
I tried to look back at those years with compassion. I was thankful for Julie. It wasn't. We were unhappy. It was an unhappy time. I try to write about the unhappiness with sort of compassion, like that. That John was somebody who was hurting, but I wanted to be, kind of honest about it too. Like again, there's an impulse, I think, when you write about your addiction to write about the rock bottoms, and really most of my rock bottoms were wanting to be alone. That to me is the saddest thing, because booze will sometimes people who drink or are out of control drinking, they want to self-isolate and they want to push people away. So yeah, those are two answers there. Yes, I did. Almost everyone in the book, with the exception of my mom, got to see the book and got to give me notes. And for the most part, there weren't that many notes.
Well, that's good.
But also like, if there's if there's an antagonist in the book, it's me.
Sure.
I'm writing critically about me. The book's epigraph is from Orson Welles, and it's about how friends make life tolerable. And I think theater kids, one thing they have in common is a sort of a hunger for community and for family.
But that alone took me back because, again, to your point, at Emerson, while I certainly wasn't a theater kid, most people don't even know that they had a print journalism major, if you can call it that. Emerson for print journalism. But I was certainly theater kid adjacent. I mean, that was all my friends.
But look, journalism and journalism school and acting school have a lot in common. The number one thing that they have in common is that all it takes to be an actor or a journalist is to like look into the mirror and say, I'm an actor, I'm a journalist. Right. I mean, there's no accrediting board. There's no board. There's no license. No one. Can you imagine an acting license? Like there's no license.
Although at the very least, you guys get SAG cards. I don't even have anything like that.
No,
There's a freelancer's union, if you can call it that. But
I was never in the. I mean, I was never a working.
She only got it recently.
I'm in the union, but I'm not working. See how that works?
And that's exactly. Right. I mean, and then the union, the Actors Equity made me, I self-produced a play once, and I couldn't afford certain actors because they were in equity. Mm-hmm. And I'm like,
I'll never understand that.
And it turned me into a Republican very briefly. I was like, fuck the unions.
Oh, that's seriously. John, thank you so much. This has been lovely. One more time, tell everyone when and where they can purchase your book.
It's called Theater Kids. My name's John DeVore. It comes out June 18th. You can find me on various social media platforms that are festooned with links and promotional assets that will guide you to the book. It'll also be in bookstores everywhere. Or you can just
really is hilarious.
Follow Bill Schultz, and he will let you know.
Yes, I just like little things like you talking about your temping. It's so very DeVore. Like one of the skills I learned was cutting and paste. Watch cutting and paste. I mean, I'm butchering it, but little things like that. I'm like, that's so you, and it made me giggle. Well, listen, buddy, thank you so much. Everyone, read it. Read the hell out of it immediately. I'm sorry. Again, June comes out 18th. Got it.
And before you go, we have a little fun segment. You won't be able to see it now, but in post, I add it in. So
you have that capability?
I do have that capability afterwards because I've learned many skills outside of theater because I've had to. It's called The More You Joe. Mm-hmm. So imagine me with a rainbow.
It's like The More You Know on NBC.
Okay, great. And there it is. Bill, will you grab me that play right there? Just sitting on top right there. Okay, John, I don't know if you've read this play. Do you feel anger?
Yes.
Oh. No, I've never heard of that play.
It's by Mara Nelson Greenberg. I think you would love this. It's an absurdist comedy, dark humor, and it's about a woman who comes into an office space, a corporate setting. They're debt collectors, mm-hmm. and they need to learn empathy. So this woman comes in to teach them about empathy. Well, none of the men know what emotions are. They just know horniness and hunger. And the women...
Those aren't emotions?
The women are just punching bags. This one character, I do a monologue from here. She keeps getting mugged in the kitchen. Someone keeps mugging her in the office kitchen. So it's just so absurd. In the original production, Justin Long was in this a few years ago. But anyways, I actually really think you would like this, so you should check it out. And everyone else who's into absurdism.
I love it. I love absurdism.
There you go. And that's it. Thank you all. Ooh. What's that? Y'all want to clap? Thank you.
Wow.